I sort of feel about gender like cats feel about microwaves. It's not really for them. And they're like, that's neat. Looks like you use that all the time. Makes your life feel good. I don't really care.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Pickles and Vodka, the mental health podcast where imperfect people have imperfect conversations. I'm your host, Christina, and let me just say, first of all, that I'm really excited for this episode. My guest, Eileen Winn, is a poet that I met online about 5 years ago when we were both struggling with eating disorders, and truly one of the most articulate people I know. Everything that comes out of their mouth is just beautiful, wise, funny. I feel like I should just let you listen to the episode and decide for yourselves. But anyway, I want to get right to that interview. So this intro is going to be short. It has definitely been a long week for me. One of those weeks that I like to say developed my character. You know, in a TV show where some weeks are just really depressing and nothing good happens and there's a lot of conflict, and the next episode all the problems magically get solved. But in that moment, things look pretty bleak for the character and you feel sorry for them, but you also know that all of this bad shit is going to reward you in the end. Like, the character is going to grow. You know, when we're watching as an audience, we love that shit because it's dramatic and it's fun watching other people's lives come apart. Let's be honest. At least if it's a fake person, you know that it's not real. You're a little less invested. Like Euphoria, for instance. The main character is a drug addict, and every episode, it seems like she finds some way to sabotage her own sobriety. And as an addict who is sober from alcohol but still heavily identifies to the addict mindset, I can really relate with that character. And it's easy for me to look at my life and be like, because things aren't as crazy as they are in Euphoria, I'm doing okay. You know, because I'm not ODing in front of my little sister and going to rehab for 12 weeks, I must be doing all right. And so it's easy for me to look at weeks like the one I just had, full of minor frustrations and stresses and, well, okay, actually, it wasn't all minor. I did have to put my car in the shop. I ran over a curb and my bumper fell off. So that happened on Tuesday, and that was not fun. On top of all the other things I was experiencing, it was just a character development week for me. So after that kind of week I had yesterday, I just didn't do anything. I sat at home with my partner and my cats, and we literally didn't do anything but watch TV and eat snacks all day. And normally it's really hard for me to do that. I feel like if I don't do anything productive with my time, I'm wasting it. But lately I've been really trying to reframe the way I look at downtime. I'm trying to look at it as more like self-care, rest being absolutely essential for your mental health. And so I purposefully told myself yesterday, you're not going to do anything and you're going to love it. And it pretty much worked. I slept more than I've slept all year. I didn't think about the podcast. I didn't think about school or work. I just was present in my body and noticing how tired it was and trying to honor it. And I would highly recommend it if you can. I know it's one of the hardest things ever, but because I had that restful day yesterday, I'm feeling pretty good today. Like I said, this is a great interview. I'm excited for y'all to hear. If you want to be a guest and you just haven't tested the waters yet, I'm here to say, come on in. The water is fine, I guess. But for real, you can DM me on Instagram or email me at picklesandvodkapodcast@gmail.com if you want to be on the podcast and tell your own story and just be awkward with me. I was going to say something even more clever, but I guess I don't have the energy for that yet. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this interview and have a great week. All right. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Hi.
I'm so excited for you to be here. I feel like we've been friends online forever, but I've never really spoken to you.
Yeah, I don't think we ever have spoken, but we have been friends online for what, 4,
Oh my
5
God,
years,
stop.
maybe?
Don't say that.
Sure. We don't have to
Why?
start there.
We can start wherever you want to. This is your show. Well, it's my show, but it's also your show. It's everyone's show. Why don't you start by introducing yourself to the lovely listeners?
Yeah, hi. My name is Eileen. My last name is Winn. My pronouns are they, them. I'm an agender poet who was born and raised in Ohio, and I'm in Florida right now getting my master's. What else? I like to rollerblade, and I have a cat named Piano.
Yes.
And
Piano is sitting in their lap in a backpack.
Yes. It's really nice. She's just purring like, I'm fine.
That's the best we can hope for, honestly.
Yes.
So what's your background with mental health? I know that's a really annoying question, but I know you have a lot of thoughts.
I do, because when you're like, what's your background? I'm like, okay, where do I start? Do I start with the symptoms, or do I go all the way back to like the fact that like there's intergenerational trauma and like, I don't know. So I think like my background in mental health is complicated. I majored in psychology in college, and that was like a lot of Mesearch in a way.
Oh my God, I love that.
Someone else on Peach said it first, so I can't like take credit. It was Diane, I believe.
Also, shout out to all the Peaches that have been on the podcast. There's this online community that has really been there since the start of the podcast, and I've had so many as guests, and it's just amazing people.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, great support system.
Most definitely. So yeah, I did a lot of like Mesearch. I wanted to understand basically like the different things that I was experiencing. So like from a young age, I definitely was like experiencing things like self-harm and like disordered eating. But I'm even before those symptoms showed up, like I can remember having like really like depressive episodes. And it's hard for me to separate that from like what was my mental health and what was situational, because as a lot of people with mental illness know, like, or understand, it can be caused by like developmental things that happen when you're developing, by abuse, by family structures, things like that. So it's hard for me to separate. I feel like my background in mental illness a lot of times is like a background of like interpersonal struggle, and those things like being extremely related.
Well, the dichotomy is really interesting to me, because it's like, which came first, like the mental illness or the trauma, you know? And in some cases, it's so hard to separate the two. And there's a lot of guilt that can happen. Like, am I broken, or should I be mad at the world for placing me in this situation, or like mad at myself? Like, do you have any experience with that?
I think for a long time, like I was really angry and needed to be really angry at my parents specifically, but also at my siblings. And I was just estranged from like my family for a long time, because I think the ways that like their mental illness and their trauma was going untreated was like just obviously interacting in a really profound way with mine. Like, you know, they say like your parents know your buttons, like they put them there. But that was like true of all of us, because we were like super enmeshed and unhealthy, and it was very like abusive and weird, and like getting out of it and keeping my distance, I think helped me separate a little bit. And I needed to be angry to like start to understand that it wasn't my fault. But like over time, I've also come to terms with a lot of that anger by like building compassion and by like being grateful for what I have in my life now. It sounds so simple, but it's like a really
and I know you've done
process.
years of work to get to that point.
Yeah.
We won't focus too much on your family background, but do you want to kind of describe the way you grew up?
Yeah. So through like getting to know my girlfriend and talking about, you know, ourselves and learning, she used the term like family cult. And I was like, damn, that hits. Like my dad was like really abusive and controlling. Both my parents had backgrounds in their childhood with like sexual abuse. And my mom definitely with like sexual assault. So like, I think they gravitated towards each other and sort of like trauma bonded and like tried to do things differently. Like, I do think I was raised better than my parents. Like, I think they did a better job than their parents did. I think the bar was on the floor. And I feel that like actually being able to clear that, like, that's why I don't have a relationship with my dad, and why like my relationship with my mom is like new. But that background really influenced there was like a lot of anger, a lot of emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Like it was just not a good time. And my parents were very miserable. Like they were not making each other happy for a long time. And there's definitely like addiction, things like that present, or sort of like not present, but
it's under the surface.
Yeah.
Well, the question I usually ask people is, was mental health talked about in your family? And most people say, you know, we had mental health issues, but we didn't talk about it. So what was the experience with your family?
It was kind of strange. It would be pulled out every once in a while. I wouldn't say that it was never talked about. Like I can remember one time I'd never liked to do sports. And I was like, don't make me exercise to my dad. Like I was like, leave me alone. And I said something to him, like, because I didn't understand how bodies worked. My mom had explained that she didn't have cartilage in her knees. And I said to my dad, like, well, mom doesn't have cartilage in her knees because she like did so many sports and like wore them out. And that's what my mom had told me. But my dad was like, don't ever say that. Your mother starved herself because of her self-esteem. And that's why she doesn't have cartilage in her knees. And was like really angry at me. I know, right? So like it was talked about in these super strange, like, I don't know what to even make of that, because it's just like so sideways. And I don't know, like he had a very strange conception of what mental health or illness meant. I could tell my mom that I was suicidally depressed and she would tell me that she would get me help, but then it wouldn't happen. But then I would go to therapy, but then my parents would like try to take over the therapy session and talk about, like, it was strange. Like there was interactions with it, but none of it like stuck. It was, I don't know. I don't even know what to make of it.
Where do you fall in the birth order?
I'm the oldest.
Oh, me too. High five.
High five.
It's a great club.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I've been talking a lot about being parentified and like thinking about that a lot too.
Oh my God.
Because my parents are unstable. Yeah.
You sent me a few topics to potentially talk about. I'm really excited because I haven't covered a lot of them on the podcast yet, but I actually really want to talk about the concept of parentification because I've been thinking about it a lot lately and it's really relevant right now. So what is that?
I would say it's when I think it's usually the oldest child, though I'm sure it could happen to any child. Like if that child is like more competent or whatever, but the oldest child, usually I think it happens to, is given responsibility like above whatever's appropriate for their developmental stage. I think it happens a lot of time to people that are assumed to be women when they're born, or I guess not women. How should I say that? I guess AFAB, right? I think it happens a lot of time to AFAB people who are expected to be like a second mom, basically. Yeah, I think it creates just like really unhealthy boundaries because you're like a parent only when they need you to be, and you're like only a kid like when it's time for you to like get what you want or like make a decision. So you have to be like responsible like an adult, but then you only have like the freedoms of a child. And it's confusing.
No agency whatsoever. It is quite confusing. And I'm nodding furiously this whole time. The listeners can't see, but I can relate a lot because I have 6 younger siblings and I basically raised them, which is why I don't want kids now. I'm just like, I'm good with my cats, you know?
Same. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I love my cat so much, but like, I think that like, if I didn't have her or like, if it was the end of her life, I'm not sure I'd get another one for a while, just especially after like getting divorced recently. Like, I'm just tired of like
responsibilities.
Yeah. And like the cat is good for me. Like I love her. She's still on my lap. I'm not going to get rid of her, but
of course not.
It's just so much because she kind of like is like a baby right now. And I just don't want kids. Like I took care of my siblings already. Pets
are a huge responsibility. I don't think people always realize when they get a pet. I mean, cats are maybe, I don't want to say lower on the responsibility scale. They're less work than like a dog, let's say, for instance. I had a dog with an ex and it was a nightmare and it made me never want a dog again. But yeah, cats, like I've never had an elderly pet, for instance. I'm kind of terrified of when my cats get old and I have to, you know, take care of them and stuff. I can barely take care of myself.
Same. And
moral of the podcast, don't get a pet.
Don't get a pet. No.
Just kidding. Pets are amazing.
Yeah. And I will say like my girlfriend's been a lot of help taking care of her, but she's not like had a cat for a while either. So it's been a learning process for both of us. And like just things are different. I project on the cat a lot of my like, oh, she feels like this because it's like, I'm the one dealing with change, but yeah, she is still in a backpack on my lap. So it's not like she doesn't feel it.
Anyway, let's talk about your divorce.
Sure, let's do it. Let's dive right in. Oh my God. So the biggest thing I will say is that I'm still learning so much about grief and nonlinear processes, and it's so fucking annoying.
What kind of experience do you have with grief overall?
I would say that like I've not experienced a lot of death in my life that felt extremely close to me. Like my great first experience with death that I really remember, I was like 16 and my great grandmother died. She was almost 100. It was not a surprise. It's not like I had been close with her. I thought she was neat, but she had always been old to me, even from the time I was a baby.
Right.
So that did not impact me very much. I had some like strange peripheral experiences with death, but it was never anyone that I like really knew closely or was friends with. And in college, I went through a process of grieving my parents and that relationship. And that felt a lot like they had died. Like I felt like an orphan for a long time. And that was a strange experience because both my parents are still alive.
Yeah. Oh God. I just want to ask you about all this stuff. This is a very non-linear conversation.
It is. I'm bad at being linear.
Hey, you don't need to be, life is not linear.
That's true. And it's like non-linear processes, right? So like when I am grieving this divorce, it brings up other griefs and other traumas, which my therapist recently pointed out to me, like grief is an emotion that runs so deep that when you experience it, it ties into the other times you've experienced it. And I just feel like that's really unfair. I feel like that's bad design. It hurts so bad. I'm tired of it.
Let's rewind a little bit and talk about what grief means to you outside of the traditional description.
Yeah. So my girlfriend and I just looked up the definition and the etymology of grief the other day because I was really curious and like where bereavement comes from. And a lot of the Latin roots have to do with being robbed and being broken. And that really resonated with me in a way that like feeling sad or angry, like didn't or doesn't. I really feel like it's like a profound loss that feels like you're missing a part of yourself. Like I would say that to me, that's like a defining aspect of grief.
And what is it about grief you feel like other people don't get in your everyday encounters?
I feel like it's the same thing I don't get, which is I will blame myself for feeling okay for a while and then breaking down because I will think to myself, you've been feeling sad the whole time, and this was just you avoiding your emotions. And then when it builds up, you have a breakdown, and it's because you haven't been taking care of your emotions the whole time. And I said that to my therapist, and she was like, no. Grief is like a roller coaster that's like not predictable. And there will be times where you just feel okay, and there's like nothing to process. You're in a mode of acceptance, and then something is going to challenge that, and you're going to get dropped all over again. And I think that a lot of people offered me support around my divorce, let me say that correctly, around my divorce early on. And I kind of was in a mode of like feeling okay with it a lot of the time. So I think I like seem fine. I'm like chugging along, and now it's a few months out and I'm like, damn, actually now I'm really struggling. And like, now it hurts bad. And it's actually like not about my ex-husband. It is about like the way that he was a portion of my life, a person who held my memory and my habits and my tastes and my routines. And that consistency was a part of me.
It takes a long time to build that consistency too, and to share yourself with the person in that way. Like, do you ever just think of all your exes running around and like their moms know your name and it's like your favorite breakfast and stuff, and you're never going to see them again? And that,
yeah,
I feel like grieving when I think of that.
Yeah, it feels like a weird like nakedness to know that like
totally.
you kind of like took off your clothes in front of someone, and now like they can just run around and like think about that anytime, but like also emotionally.
I mean, I try not to think about it, but
yeah.
Well, I think
that's horrifying.
As you talk about grief, I don't think it's something that ever really ends. Like, I mean, it is kind of an emotion. People think you have a grieving period and then you're done grieving and then they don't need to support you anymore. And then later on, like you said, you feel sad. And it's like, oh, this is a part of you, It's like happiness or sadness never leaves you. It's always in you, and it comes up, as it does in life. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think grief is something you'll always deal with?
I think it is. And I think it's something that gets like more sporadic and less intense over time. I get extremely frustrated at the idea that it doesn't go away, because I struggle with the idea that just because I understand an emotion doesn't mean it's over.
Ouch.
And like, it really makes me feel like stupid to revisit these emotional places, because in my brain, intellectually, it is over. I have accepted it. So that disconnect is tough, and it makes me feel like rough about the idea that grief can last that long. But I also know, like, I don't grieve my dad anymore. Like I'm moving into a space in my life where I'm not even really writing a lot of poems about him. I'm sure that I probably will write poems about him for the rest of my life, but it's not something where, like, for a while, like for a couple of years, even, like, most of my poems are about my dad. And I was
I read some of them.
I hate this, you know? Oh, thank you.
Oh God, I want to talk about your poetry too and stuff, but back to your divorce. Let's stay on track.
Yes. Back to the divorce.
So when did you meet your ex-husband?
Oh my gosh, I met him when I was 18. It was November 10th, 2011. So it was very beginning of 2011. We met in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. And then October of 21 is when I was like, oh shit, I guess I really do need a divorce. So it was about 10 years.
Sometimes that's how long it takes, you know? I mean, not all relationships last forever. And that's like the hardest thing to accept, I think. Mm-hmm. Just because you end a relationship doesn't mean it was a bad relationship. But then, you haven't said anything about it yet. So.
No, but because you did your research, right? Like,
a little bit. I try to keep the element of surprise.
Sure. Yeah. Who doesn't love that? We're still on good terms. Like, the catalyst for us getting divorced was me being gay. And there are other things in our relationship that I think were tough, but I think that just ultimately that was the main reason why it was just like never going to work. And I think that, like, though things are weird right now, how could they not be?
Right. I
think that, like, we will be friends. And I think that, like, my siblings consider him their brother. And so I consider him, like, in that he's important to me and always will be. But yeah.
That almost makes it harder.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Or at least it did at first. Because after a while too, there were things where I was like, that really wasn't working. Like, I'm glad that, like, our relationship ended well. I also feel, like, really grateful. And there definitely is still grief, but it's very like, speaking of a roller coaster, right? The highs have been like, wow, like, all these things that I stopped expecting in a relationship because it wasn't something that he could offer. Like, I can expect that again, and it's not wrong.
Yeah. Oh my God.
That's cool.
I just want to, like, let that sink in, because that's so, what's the word? It's a hot take.
Spicy.
So when you guys got together, I'm assuming you didn't know you were gay.
I didn't know I was gay, but I had been identifying as bisexual. But here's the part that doesn't make any sense. In my head, I was a bisexual straight person.
Okay.
And I didn't really feel queer. I was giving myself a queer label. Everyone around me knew that I was queer. I was, like, dressing alternatively and being like, I want to be president of the Gay Straight Alliance at my college and shit. But, like, I felt like essentially a straight person, probably also because I was dating Michael, like, the whole time. And then before him, I had been engaged to a dude in high school because I grew up, like, really religious. So, like, very heteronormative.
Hey.
Like, yeah.
I feel the same exact way. When I was in treatment, I, like, explored the possibility of being queer. And I feel very invalid because I've only been with dudes, and it's like, I also grew up super religious, like straight passing, all that stuff. And it's just like, it's such a spectrum, and no one can make you feel like, I don't know, labels are stupid.
They really are. They really are. And without, like, representation, like, I didn't understand so much about what it meant to be queer. And I don't know. There's this document online, you might have heard of it, called the Lesbian Master Doc.
No.
Okay. Google it, like, so immediately. It's basically like, here's how heteronormativity might have affected you. And I read that, like, really early on. So, okay, this has to do with the divorce. I read it early on when Mike was in inpatient treatment, which he decided to do because his job was, like, extremely stressful, and he was, like, heading toward a breakdown with that. And then I was like, listen, like, I'm really gay, and this is tough, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but this is really pointing me in that direction. And he was kind of like, well, if I don't have a job and I don't have you, I'm fucked, and that's a problem. So I need to go take care of myself. So he just, like, went away for a month. And so like 4 days in, and I'm like crying the whole time, right? And I'm Googling like, how do you know if you're gay? And like this pops up, and TikTok is telling me that I'm gay, right? Because TikTok knows.
Yeah, TikTok does know.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm looking at it right now, by the way.
Yes. So that comes up in my algorithm enough times that I'm like, fine, I'll fucking Google it. And I read through it. And then I think about the relationship that I'm having with my girlfriend. Cause at the time, like I'm poly. And I can just see the difference. And I can see that it like has to do with gender. And I can see that like all these things that I was kind of like resenting Michael for, but I knew weren't really wrong, didn't have to do with my trauma. It was that I just didn't like that he was a guy and I was married to that. Like
that's so hard to accept.
It was. And it wasn't until he went away, so I didn't have to be constantly confronted with how much I care about and respect him, that I could see that like all these annoyances that I were swallowing were like connected to something. And like, we really just needed that time apart, which then made me realize too, like, was our relationship like really codependent? Like that we didn't have enough space from each other to see how we were feeling. Cause then also in retrospect, once we separated, I was like, I don't think this man's been in love with me for a long time. Ooh, that hurts my feelings. Oh, that's weird. Cause now I have nothing to do with it. Like, So that's been like a weird grief too of like, oh man, like we've just been roommates for a long time. What was that? Like, damn.
I've been there a few times, and it's really, especially if the person's a good person and you care about them.
And we were still like watching TV together on the couch. Like I was trying to like be like, let's go to the beach and like, let's do stuff. And like, we really were trying to like work on things. We were seeing like couples therapists and stuff, but like, yeah, we were just like really good at therapy and like really good at communicating.
Yeah.
So, and we were like healthy and respected each other. So it was really hard to see all the stuff that was like wrong, which sounds like bragging.
No.
This was like the beginning of October. It was like right around October 1st that he checked in, and it was like October 7th that I was like, I like circled it in my planner. I'm like, this was the day that I said the D word out loud to someone else and I couldn't take it back. I like talked to my therapist, and then I talked to my oldest friends on the way home. I was like, okay, girlfriend, like she was like the last person. No, I think I told my mom right after I told Michael, but yeah, she was the last person that I told, where like after the trifecta of like therapist, best friend, and romantic partner, like if you tell those three people something, you can't go back on it. No. You can't be like, actually, I changed my mind. Like, I want to wait.
Like, no, you're not. Sorry. You've reached the point of no return.
Yeah. And then like, I told another old friend too, and she's like, Eileen, you've been a lesbian for a long time. And I was like, why didn't anybody tell me? And she was like, you were telling everybody else. We thought you knew. Well,
so, okay, you're agender. Can you tell the listeners what that means and like how it intersects with your lesbian identity?
Yeah, that's such a good question. There's this meme online that's like, no gender, only lesbian. And like, that's kind of how I feel. I just feel like I'm an extremely like sapphic person. And I was assigned female at birth. I identify with womanhood in like a weird way where like, I kind of just don't. I sort of feel about gender like cats feel about microwaves. It's not really for them. And they're like, that's neat. Looks like you use that all the time. Makes your life feel good. I don't really care. I don't even know what that does. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm a cat. So I think a little bit of that has to do with the fact that I think I might be on the spectrum, but I just don't feel like gender makes sense to me, and I don't have time for it, and I'd rather not. And I feel like identifying with the way that like I love women is like the closest that I get to identifying with womanhood. So I feel comfortable saying lesbian because the way that I love women makes me feel more, I guess, womanly, whatever that means, or feminine.
I like the way that you're describing this because I don't feel like you resent womanhood or you are trying to escape it. It's just something that exists, like you said.
Yeah, so I feel that so hard because I have a spicy take. I just feel like I saw a TikTok the other day that was talking about like, sometimes I identify as a woman, but and listed all like when woman means this or that. And then it was like, and sometimes I don't, like when woman means prey or like lunch meat. And I'm like, that just sounds like you're afraid of misogyny and violence, and that's valid, but I'm not really sure that changes your identity. It sounds like it makes you feel alienated from it. And that's sad, but I'm not sure that makes you not cis. And I'm not here to police anyone's experience at all. But I just think that like, maybe those are two different things. And when I hear that, I'm like, that's not my experience of wanting to use they pronouns. It's not because like I'm afraid of gendered or sexed violence. That's going to happen around my life. It has already. That's like nothing to do with it.
No one can escape that. You can do all the right things, be all the right things, and you're still, it sucks. It fucking sucks. That's just the way the world is.
Sorry, I'm talking over you. I just really agree.
No, please talk this is your platform. I'm just so happy we're doing this, and I want to hear all the things. What is your first experience with using they, them pronouns? Like, how did you go public with that?
So once I realized it was a thing, I just like changed it on Facebook and like didn't tell anyone. And for many years, like did not correct people, but would like put it out there to a point where like other people would bring it up with me. I'd be like, do you want me to use these pronouns for you? They're like around, but you've never said anything about it. And I'm like, sure. Like it's really uncomfortable, especially because at first when I started thinking about my gender, I was really terrified that I would be a man because I thought if I wasn't a woman, I had a really binary understanding of gender.
Most people do.
So I thought like, well, if I'm not a woman, I must be a man. And that terrified me because from a young age, I kind of understood that my gender wasn't connected to my body. And I've always been very grateful that I was born with the body that I have because it looked like everyone else was like not having a good time. They could only play with like gray stuff and they had to be mean to each other. And I didn't like that. But I didn't really feel connected to like womanhood or girlhood either. I was just like, ooh, that looks gross. Like, I don't want that one. So when I first started exploring gender, it was scary to me because like, I'm not a man.
Yeah.
And I think that seeing like this giant list of genders, like, the ones conservatives make fun of really helped because as soon as I saw that, like, you can experience an absence of something and that can like mean a thing about you, like,
Talk about that a little more. Like, I'm curious, growing up the way you did, how you, like, what your influences were and how you started kind of tiptoeing out of the bubble that you were in. Because, I mean, I look at you now and you're so well versed in all this stuff, obviously, but I know that you didn't start out that way. And I'm really curious about the journey, as they say.
Yeah. So I also majored in women and gender studies in college. Again, the Mesearch, right? I was trying to figure out why I was like not having a good time mentally and like who I was. And those two things just influenced everything I wanted to study. And those were sort of the first like splits between me and my family, because I started being like, I think that sitcom is sexist. And my dad was like very fragile and not here for that. And was like, no, if anything, it's sexist towards men because Raymond and everybody loves Raymond. Stupid.
Oh my God.
I'm like, okay, I don't think I can have this conversation with you because one, I'm young and I'm angry, and two, like you're not here for it. So both of these things are not.
Sometimes
working.
it's the safest thing for you is just to walk away. Like I used to think I had to win every conversation with my dad, for instance, and now it's just better for our relationship and for both of us if I just give up that fight. Because part of me thinks some people don't change, but that's also kind of a depressing viewpoint to have. So I'm not going to be the one to change you. That may be a better way to think of it.
I feel that.
So back to gender.
Yeah. So being open with him in any way about my opinions on sexism and gender kind of like confirmed them because I was like, you are reacting as though your power is being challenged when I point out that like maybe there's an imbalance here. And so starting to tiptoe outside of the box was a lot of like the internet and finding Tumblr and being like,
Tumblr.
who are all these people with like breasts and mustaches and who are like putting glitter in their beards and who are just like mixing up all these different gendered signifiers. And not only that, but like pushing it over the top and like expressing themselves and making art out of it. And like the sex positivity there was like something that was so counter to what I understood. And also my best friends from high school had gone to college and came back and it was like, read this book, and had given me a copy of The Ethical Slut. So I was starting to question ideas about like relationships and power. Can you be ethically non-monogamous? All these things were opening up to me that I had never even had them hinted at in my life. So I was doing a lot of like clumsy learning. And that's, I think, where a lot of that, like, am I a man came from? Like, I didn't know who I was at all. I was just trying on anything that I saw.
Yeah.
And I was like trying really hard to understand like my standpoint and like what gender could be. And yeah, Tumblr was like the big thing.
When you're taught that there's only men and women, it's like, okay, I don't feel like a woman, so am I a man? And then you realize there's way more than just those genders, and also what is gender and do I have a gender? It's just like, oh my God, I can't stop smiling, but also I'm terrified.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, so much that. And I feel like I was walking around with like a secret for a while because I hadn't like figured out the right word. I was still Googling like what are genders? Like,
No shame to anyone who does that, by the way. I Google the most embarrassing stuff all the time.
oh, and you should Google it. I was searching all the Tumblr hashtags. I was like looking at all different kinds of stuff that like maybe I think I even knew like maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't who I am, but like I dig the style, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to see that people like could be free. Like people, there's a trans woman who died by suicide at one point, and people on Tumblr talked about putting on a bunch of makeup and going and crying in public because that's like what she did. And like she was a person who cried in public to be like, this is life. Like if I'm going to cry, I'm going to cry in front of people. And I was like, I just started getting chills.
I'm getting chills now.
It's really cool. Yeah. So like seeing that and being like, damn, like you can do that. You can go be so emotional in the face of a world that doesn't seem to care about you. You can go be yourself exactly as you are, exactly as you say you are. Don't change a thing. Just cry if you want. Like,
hell
that's
yeah.
so cool, right? So just seeing that example and seeing people who weren't just like repressing themselves all the time and like self-flagellating for like every little indulgence and like just so perfectionist, like it was such a relief and such a change of pace that
oh my God, yeah,
it was exhilarating.
I once went to the elementary school where I worked and I didn't feel like wearing makeup that day, and I had a pimple, and this little third grade boy came up to me and he was like, "What's that on your face?" And I don't know. It's so stupid when you think, like my sister was like, we were watching a movie with a dinner party scene and everyone was dressed up. I was like, isn't that weird that people are just dressed up like that to sit down and eat with their friends? Like, who says that we have to do that? It's like all these weird customs when you think about it. It's like society is so weird that we all just conform to this without talking about it. We all just kind of agree. That you don't cry in public, and you have, if you go out with bags under your eyes, it's like you're sick or sad or something.
Right. I don't think it's really good for like our communities. I think that it makes it hard for people to connect with each other if we can't be vulnerable in like any way besides like fucking, right? Yeah. Like that's like the main way anybody gets intimacy or vulnerability in our society, because like friendships are not supposed to be touchy-feely. Like we have all these weird American ideas about relationships. And I don't know exactly what I think or feel about relationships. I feel pretty monogamous right now, but like, I think it's important to be able to tell my friends that I love them, to like give them hugs, And I feel like a lot of people don't have that, and that's sad.
Yeah.
And I wish everyone a very happy hug your friends.
Yes. If there's anything that you take away from this episode, go hug your friend. Even if your friend is your cat. Just go out, hug your cat, tell them that you love them. I want to go back to you getting out of Ohio, though.
Yeah.
Because you're in Florida now.
I am in Florida. I'm in South Florida, which is like a different country, and it's awesome.
I remember when you moved there. I think you were with your ex at the time, right?
Yeah, I was with my ex-husband, and I was also with my other ex because we were poly, and I was dating this like super old guy.
I remember that.
Yeah, wild times. That didn't last, didn't it? Isn't it? Yeah. So I moved down here to go to school. I basically like my whole college career, what I really wanted to do was major in like creative writing or do English, but I had been like really discouraged from that by my family and by my dad specifically. I want to do something with like visual art. I want to do something with creative writing. And I thought that everyone paid for grad school. I didn't get like a super great scholarship to undergrad. And so I was like, well, I don't want to take out any more loans. I'm kind of burnt out on school. And who the hell? Yeah. And who the hell is going to pay for a degree in poetry? That's ridiculous. That's like saying my favorite pet to have is a unicorn. Okay, then you just don't get a pet. Like, cool. So then I found out unicorns exist. A few years after I graduated, one of my friends was saying that she was applying to get a master's in screenwriting. And I said, what the hell? How can, like, that's so great. I wish I could afford that. I'd do the same thing. And she was like, oh, I'm not paying for it. And I was like, then what are you doing? She said, well, fully funded programs exist. And I said, I'll be right back. And then I applied to 5 schools. in like a really short period of time. I was living in Cleveland at the time, very, very top of Ohio, and the winters there are like really brutal. And I really just needed to move.
Yeah.
And I didn't really care where. My husband was not working any job that he really cared about. He was doing like HelloFresh, Lyft, Uber, Starbucks stuff. And so he was like, yeah, fuck it. Let's go. And so when I got in, I was like, I have to take this chance. I got to go. If I have to do another Cleveland winter, I'll die. And this is what I want to do more than anything in the world. They're going to pay for it. They're going to pay me to go to school. I didn't realize at the time, like how the stipend would hit in Boca Raton, Florida, which is one of like the most expensive places to live in the country.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. But at the time, like I had support and we had no kids. And I did have custody of my sister, but she had just turned like 19 and was really ready to get out of living with her older sibling. Like she was over it.
Is she the youngest in your family?
Yeah, she's the baby.
Oh, that's a whole different world.
Yes. Oh my gosh, such a different world. I tried to get her to move with us down to Florida because I was kind of worried about her being on her own. But at the same time, I'm really glad that she got to do her own thing. And I knew that she just really needed to be independent for a while.
Yeah.
I think because she didn't move with us, like we're still pretty close because I think that it would have been tough.
Oh my God. Yeah. My sister, she came out to my parents in 2018 and she moved in with me and my ex in DC. And then when my ex and I broke up, the three of us lived together like a sitcom. It was really, really wild. But anyway, she was going to move with me to Seattle, but she didn't. And it was the best thing that could have not happened for us because.
Yeah.
But it's so heartbreaking. Like talking about grief, this is kind of a tangent, but when you're an older sibling and then you realize that your younger siblings not only are not going to learn from your mistakes, but they just actively repeat your same mistakes.
Yeah.
That is heartbreaking.
It is. I keep being like, please go to therapy. Please go to therapy.
But they have to learn. Like, that's the only way to do it. That's how we did it.
It's so true. And then I look at Christy too, and I think like I had a much better, or no, she has a much better head on her shoulders than I did when I was her age. Like, yeah, she's more confident, more independent. She's done a lot more like quote unquote adult things, probably because she didn't go to college, right?
Yeah,
like,
same with my siblings.
Yeah. And I was kind of babied in college and afterward by living with a lot of people like my age. And so for her to kind of strike out, do it on her own, always be the youngest one and like trying to catch up, like she's kicking ass.
I'm just jealous of how they have both feet in the world and they're just so curious. And I'm so jealous of that.
Same. I was thinking about that, about how like the millennial stereotype is someone that's like, how did I get that way? Like, why was I afraid to make phone calls for so long?
Oh my God,
why do so many people like my age have like crippling anxiety? And why are we like just self-soothing instead of sometimes doing exposure?
You're speaking to my soul right now. I literally was like lying face down on the bed before this. I was like, I don't want to do anything. I'm so anxious. I don't want it to be tomorrow because that means it's going to be Monday. And I just can't think about any of my obligations right now. And it's just like, why?
I'm trying really hard to practice opposite action, that good old DBT skill, and just say like, okay, I might be afraid of this, but it's not going to kill me. I have to like face it head on. It's okay if I only spend 15 minutes doing it. Like I was definitely nervous before this too, but trying like DBT just saved my life. And I'm trying really hard to be skillful more often because of the grief that I'm experiencing. So when things like anxiety are heightened, like I love talking about myself. Why am I nervous? Right? Like my anxiety is heightened because I've been emotional lately. And then I'm like, that's goofy. Better get some water because maybe I had a little too much caffeine and like, let's do this. Which is so hard, but it gets easier.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And I have a podcast, so we can't ever be anxious.
No, of course not. Of course not. That would be ridiculous. It's not like that's something that anxious people do as an outlet or anything.
Yeah. I feel like we're so off track.
Oh, yeah.
What were we even talking about?
I think I was supposed to talk about divorce. That's the thing, though. I always get off topic talking about my divorce because in my head, too, it's kind of hard to talk about. My girlfriend's been making fun of me because she's like, you keep being like, I'll just have a crumb of divorce. Just a little tidbit. Just a palate cleanser. just a little spoonful of divorce. Goes down easy. She's like, it's still fucking divorce, Eileen.
Well, hey, it's like exposure therapy. Start small. just
It
a
is.
sprinkling.
It is. I think, like having a hard time accepting that like it's going to be tough when we care about each other. Cause yeah, that's something that makes it harder, but it's also something that makes it easier. I don't know.
Talk about your poetry, because we haven't really talked about it, and I'm obsessed. You go to school for it, obviously. You've been published and shit.
That's true.
And I just want to talk about, like, when did you first start getting into that, and how is it related to your mental health?
So this is a really great question to be talking about because I have to write a thesis essay on like this exact thing. But
perfect.
it absolutely like, yeah, right. Like, thank you for helping me do my homework. It's very related to my mental health. From a young age, I was really concerned about like religion and God watching me. And I really wanted to express how I was feeling. And I had gone to church a lot and I took the Bible very seriously and at face value. Again, I think I'm a little bit on the spectrum. So when the Bible says like, you like should only create things in the name of the Lord, I think every poem I have to write has to be about Jesus. Otherwise I'm sinning. And I would feel guilty anytime that I like didn't write a religious poem, but I was writing poems all the time. Even if it was just like at the end, a little couplet being like, and this is why God is really good and why we should do what he says we should or whatever. Like, because I'm freaking myself out. Oh my gosh. And the first time I used a curse word in a poem, girl.
Oh my God.
Scared. I was so scared. I was like, someone's going to see.
I'm recording a solo episode after this, and I'm going to be reading in a journal entry from 2009. And I was trying to be a Christian girl at the time too, but also I used the word like tit in one of my entries. And like, I would write something like, oh my God, but the G had to be capitalized. It's just
of course.
Like, it's so cringy, but that's where we come from.
It's so true. I would like hit my friends for cursing. Like I was just so concerned about like purity for so long.
Oh my God, purity culture. We can go back on another day and talk about that for hours. Yeah. God.
For sure.
I want a bumper sticker that said purity culture fucked me up.
I want to put that on my forehead. Like,
right? Let's get matching tattoos after this.
I'm into it. Let's go.
Okay, but poetry.
Yes. So
you were not writing about Jesus.
No, but I would try to a lot. But every once in a while, like I wouldn't, but mostly, even if I was writing about Jesus, I was really writing about being depressed, about feeling trapped. I started writing poetry when I was around like 10, 11, 12 years old in there. And one of the first poems that I ever wrote was a religious poem that like my priest still has in like the office, like the sacristy in the back of the church. Like I saw it this past Christmas when I went to visit my family. It's a whole other can of worms.
My mouth is just open. I don't know what to say to that.
I know. He's like, every day before I say mass, I shine my shoes. I look at this poem and I wonder, where is Eileen? And I'm like, not where you think. It's so cringy too, the poem. It's like, it's called He Is Our King. Like, it's very like,
standard.
I'm an old Christian. Yeah. Very standard. So I wrote a lot of that for a long time before I started to break out of it. In high school, I think I stopped feeling a certain amount of guilt. I was really like starting to kind of struggle with adhering to my faith. Puberty was winning. I wanted to fool around. I wanted to kiss people. And like that, I was like, uh-oh. So then I started writing poetry about other stuff because I was like, well, that's not as bad as all the kissing that I want to do.
Did you write poetry about it?
I did. Yeah, I totally did. It was very cringy. And also, again, like red flag for being a secret lesbian, right? I was in a long distance relationship with someone who was also trying very hard to be chaste. So like we were being very like pure. And I was like, this is fine for most of it, right? Like, but yeah, so I started experimenting with form and like doing different things. It was still very much like based in my mental health. I would take creative writing classes and like hated the prompts. I hated doing anything that I was told to. It wasn't until I got to college that like I got some more like advanced ideas for what to create, like take a news article and write a poem, things like that are actually kind of interesting to do. That like I started feeling like I was writing from a place that was maybe a little bit more than just emotional, but it really wasn't until now that I started to get more invested in the process instead of writing from a place of like being upset. So like I'll see a retweet and be like, that's the first line of a poem. I don't know what yet, but now I'm going to create it. As opposed to being like, I'm really sad, I need to write a poem. Sometimes like the form and the content are coming like before the emotion, which is a cool place to be at as an artist or as a writer.
Yeah.
It took a long time to get here to be more process focused. But yeah, that's kind of my poetry history in a nutshell.
How do you see your mental health being affected on a daily basis because of your poetry?
So anytime that I get upset or that I feel like an uncanny or strange moment, there is a part of my brain that's like poem fodder. Like, this is some scraps. You could save these for later, maybe make something out of it. And that helps. Like, that helps me make meaning out of feeling miserable.
Totally.
Also, when I'm writing, I can write anything. I can write anything that exists at all ever. So I can write poems where like mental illness makes you smarter, or I have a pet narwhal in my bathtub. These are poems that I've been writing recently.
Oh my God. I love it.
And it's a place where like my mental illness can be a joke or a metaphor or a cartoon instead of like a thing that makes me really miserable.
I think about that all the time. Because there's other cultures, right, that they place a lot of reverence on mental illness. I sound like super ignorant because I don't know what it is, but I know that that's a thing that exists. Like, this isn't the only way to think about mental illness.
Yeah, a lot of cultures too think about it as something that's in the body, which I really like because I think of my poetry as something that's in the body. And I think of my poetry as a space that comes from like a physical place inside me, a space that is about like attention to the world around me more so than just like thinking. And it's my job to translate that. But like, I feel like mental illness can be such a similar experience. You like feel something in your body, you struggle to understand how to say it. Like, you have to put words on it. You have to translate it in order to like move through it. And for me, poetry is really similar. And I think that's why it's helped me move through stuff with mental illness, but also like that's such a space of possibility to just feel something in your body and move through. Like, that could be anything. So
well, I was gonna say that's a great segue into, you know, your relationship with your body, because if you don't use those feelings in your body and put them out as art or whatever, then that's going to come out in other ways, like addiction and eating disorders and all this stuff. And I know you're no stranger to that. We don't have to talk about it a ton, but I don't know, what's your relationship with your body like now, and how has that evolved over the years?
Oh gosh, it's evolved so much. Like, whenever you first met me, that was such a low point. And my relationship with my body was characterized by kind of similar feelings of like purity and fear. But instead of like every poem has to be about God, it was like every meal has to be nutritiously the bare minimum and as full as I can get. And like, it was just always this like push toward like perfection that had to do, I think, with really believing about like things about excess in my body and trying to almost like exorcise those emotions. And my relationship with my body now is like, I just have a different understanding of how emotions live in my body. I understand them as something that can only go away through attention and can only go away through acceptance. And that doesn't mean that I'm good at those things. It just means I know about it, right? but
you're not? You don't have it all figured out? What am I talking to you for?
Shucks, I don't know.
Well, how did you come to that conclusion, though?
Oh, shucks, so much DBT therapy and like having to go sober for a while too, like not drinking, not smoking weed, no cigarettes, no medication. Wow. Just raw dog in reality for several months.
That's literally my worst nightmare.
It was a time when my eating disorder was really bad. Like, I was walking for hours all the time, but I also had such a clarity, which is so funny too, because I also really was avoiding pot at the time, not just because of munchies and because my therapist told me not to, but because I would smoke weed and I would be like, damn, eating disorders are like stupid.
Yes.
And it was so weird.
God, called out.
Like, all of a sudden, like, weed would be like, you know, this isn't sustainable, right? Like, what are you going to do tomorrow, loser? Like, and I would have this clarity where I'd be like, what, where is that coming from? Because like in my daily life sober, that was not happening. But yeah, coming to terms with so much about emotions by having no other way to deal with them, except like, even though I was like restricting, I was still eating extremely regularly. And even though I was probably exercising too much, I was trying to be mindful and it was a lot of walking.
Listen, no one can be perfect.
No one can be perfect, right? So, but those are like, that was the extent of my bad coping, was like having a lot of food judgments, but still trying to eat enough and exercising too much, but not that bad, right? Like, that was it. That's so little, right? Like,
that's, and so getting in touch with your body in a whole scary new way.
It really was. It really was. And then I started not even using those coping mechanisms to deal with it. And that's when they finally let me like try medication to help regulate my mood because I was in an eating disorder like program, the Emily program in Cleveland. I highly recommend.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them.
Their model. Yeah. It worked really well for me. Might not for everybody, but DBT, they're really good about adhering to like the exact ways of practicing it. And I found my therapist, shout out to Sam, she was really good. She like challenged me on my bullshit. She was smarter than I was and like would point out things that I didn't know about myself. Like she was genuinely insightful. And she had this really good balance of caring about what I was saying and invalidating me, but really not babying me. She was not about bullshit. And like, I needed that because I was very much steeped in bullshit. And I was used to therapists being like, it's okay. Just like affirm yourself. And like, that wasn't getting me anywhere. Like, okay, I affirm that I don't want to eat today. Like,
yeah. Hey.
Right. Like, okay, cool. Done. I'm fixed, I guess. Like,
wait, you're not fixed?
Well, my doctor is worried I might want to have kids. So no, I'm just kidding.
You're a funny one.
Yeah, no, I would say though, I'm really largely in recovery. And I always have to hesitate not to make the joke about being large and in recovery.
Oh my God, stop.
I know, right? It's mean.
We all think it. It's okay.
It's just funny wordplay to me at this point. I'm a poet.
Words are hilarious.
They are. But no, I have a lot of peace with my body where like I either like it or I feel pretty neutral. I think I have things that I would change about it. I think that's kind of normal because I don't think about it all the time. But like if someone's like, what would you do if you won the lottery? I'm like, well, breast lift isn't not on there, but like I'm not currently saving, whatever.
Yeah. Also, it's your body. You're allowed to change it if you want to within, as long as you're taking care of yourself and you're mentally healthy.
I completely agree with that. And I think it's like a kind of harsh and dogmatic view of body positivity if you don't allow for that. Because like I love my tattoos and piercings. Like I want to alter my body sometimes, right?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that's like the where I'm at on that spectrum is like really normal, especially in like our fucked up American society. And I've done a lot to like let go of food judgments. And I just feel like my relationship with my body, I just feel like I want it to work. And like, I think that's pretty great.
Hell yeah.
I just want to be able to like rollerblade.
That's not like, it's crazy how like, I also use the word crazy as a descriptor a lot. I'm trying not to do that as much, but it's wild how your body stops working after a certain amount of time. And like, I don't take it for granted anymore.
No.
So yeah, just wanting it to work.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Just wanting it to work. I used to really like not care about that. I think like exercise was always like punishment or something difficult. And now I just like want to get out and like do fun stuff. And like, that means having a body that works. So for me, like it's really good. I would say for me, that's like a pretty ideal version of recovery.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
This has been so great. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we say goodbye? What's next for your poetry and for your mental health, I guess, is the next question.
That's such a nice question. That's such a good one. For my poetry, I have two things coming out in print soon, which is exciting. I have a poem in an anthology coming out with Small Orange, which is cool. Their second anthology I'm in. And then the 8th issue of Cherry Tree Review is going to have 2 of my poems in it, which is really exciting. One of them is where God says sorry by like I rewrote a Catholic prayer, the act of contrition. So I'm excited for that one to get published. So that's what's next. And for my mental health, I started seeing a therapist again because I kind of need like some emotional support conversations while I'm doing like my last semester of grad school and moving in with my girlfriend and going through this divorce. And so all these things kind of swirling around me, I was like, I need to have an outlet. So
I'm so proud of you. Like seriously,
Shucks,
since I don't know you that well, but just since knowing you online, like you've really taken your recovery into your own hands, and like while acknowledging that you're not perfect, and it's just really beautiful and encouraging to see.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like every recovery is like bespoke, and I just whatever works for you, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I think too, like just getting to root issues is so difficult, but so powerful for, at least that was my experience, and integrating over time. It's nice that you have seen that process, because it has been such a process, and having that comparison of like, damn, like 2018, that was a hard year. We're not there anymore.
I would never go back if you paid me. Never.
Nope. Couldn't do it.
Except I liked my hair. My hair was long in 2018. Where can people find you on social media and stuff if they want to get in touch or read your stuff?
Okay, so I didn't know how this came off, right? But when I'm first chatting up my girlfriend, she was like, where can I read your poetry? And I was like, oh no, you can like Google me. I didn't realize that sounded like...
You can't. I did. Before this.
You can.
I literally did.
Yeah. So you can Google me. I'm in like Alien Magazine and Blood Orange Tarot and a couple other online places. The Best of the Net anthology. I have a poem in there. But you can find me on social media by finding me on Instagram. I'm shift.aced. It's kind of like shit-faced, but not.
It's my favorite username ever.
Thank you. Right before that, I think I was, what was I? I was Judge Booty for a while. I really have fun coming up with my Instagram names.
Shift.aced. Got it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And on Twitter, I'm all one word, Weird Museum.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you so much again, Eileen. This was such a pleasure. And I'm just excited to see where you go next.
Thank you so much. This was like so much fun. Thanks for letting me talk about myself for an hour.
Of course.
That was a good time.
And Ruby, hold on. Oh my God. This is...
Oh my gosh, kitty cat. She's so fluffy.
She's very fluffy. Yeah, you had to see her before.
I did. I think Piano's hiding now, unfortunately, but she says goodbye.
Oh, goodbye, Piano.
So thank you so much. This was really fun. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Hello, friends. It's Christina again. As always, thank you for listening. If you want to support Pickles and Vodka, you can give us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Pickles and Vodka Podcast. If you could relate to anything at all we talked about today, or you just want to say hi, email me at picklesandvodkapodcast@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram at picklesandvodkapodcast. Stay safe and have a good week. Bye.